The Titanic sailed out of Southampton on the 10th of April 1912 on her maiden voyage. But some said the ship was doomed even before she sailed. Constructed in Belfast by the shipbuilding firm Harland and Wolff, Titanic is assigned with ship's new hull number 390904 is completely made up. Catholic workers saw this as blasphemy and worried that harm would come to the ship. Was the Titanic doomed due to a mummy's curse? Did an ancient mummy seal the Titanic fate? Princess of Amen-Ra lived some 1,500 years before Christ. When she died, she was buried in a deep vault at Luxor on the banks of the Nile. In the late 1890s, four rich Englishmen visiting excavations at Luxor bought an exquisitely fashioned mummy case containing Princess Amen-Ra's body. One of the men had the coffin taken to his hotel. A few hours later he was seen walking out towards the desert. He never returned. The next day one of the men was shot accidentally. The third man in the foursome found on his return to home that the bank holding his entire savings had failed. The fourth guy suffered a severe illness, lost his job and reduced to nothing. Princess of Amen-Ra curse had started. Nevertheless, the coffin reached England, causing more misfortune along the way. Then bought by a London businessman. After three of his family members had been injured in a road accident and the house damaged by fire, he donated it to the British Museum. As the coffin was being unloaded at the museum courtyard, the truck suddenly went into reverse and trapped a passerby. Then the casket was being lifted up the stairs by two workmen. One fell and broke his leg and the other, apparently in perfect health, died 2 days later. Once the princess was installed in the Egyptian room, trouble really started. Staff refused to go in that room. One watchman even died on duty. There was nothing but trouble for anyone who came near the mummy. The museum had enough and the princess was taken down to the basement. The museum sold the mummy to a private seller who had nothing but bad luck, and he sold the mummy to a hard-headed American who said superstitious nonsense and arranged for its removal to New York. The American and the mummy went aboard a sparkling new White Star liner, the Titanic, which never reached New York. Was the Princess of Amen-Ra the curse of the Titanic sinking? A number of Titanic survivors reported to have noticed an unidentified vessel approximately 5 to 6 miles away from the sinking ship, which reportedly lingered until 2 a.m. One eyewitnesses speculated that the craft was possibly a submarine that had surfaced to assess the damage it had caused, and after time it skulked off, and also cited survivor testimony about number of explosions that seemed to go off deep within the ship. The sub may have deliberately targeted the luxury liner or possibly collided with it. Theory goes that J.P. Morgan sank the Titanic to pave the way for the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank in the USA. The bank's creation was opposed by millionaire John Jacob Astor, mining magnate. Benjamin Guggenheim and Macy's co-owner Isidor Straus. But Morgan dodged death in 11th hour. The powerful financier owned the IMM, which in turn owned the White Star Line. As such, he had his own personal suite promenade deck and specially designed bath on the ship. Morgan was supposed to be on the ship as it was Titanic maiden voyage, but he decided to skip the trip at the last second and decided to linger in Europe in order to buy tapestries for his art collection. So what reason would Morgan have allegedly sank his own ship? Conspiracy theorists say in the interest of clearing away opposition to the Federal Reserve Bank. So the trouble started when the Olympic crashed into a warship in 1911 and was at blame for the accident in an ensuing inquiry. As a result, the White Star Line, an IMM subsidiary, was unable to receive an insurance payment. So the White Star Line fixed up Olympic as best it could and masqueraded it as Titanic, by allowing the wounded ship to continue on under an assumed name. The company could collect the insurance payment when it sank. However, White Star Line didn't want to kill anyone on board the ship. The idea was to have a slow sinking so another ship can come in time to rescue everyone on board. But it didn't go to plan like that. So the story goes, Titanic struck the iceberg at around 23:40 on Sunday the 14th of April 1912. Titanic sank on the 15th of April 1912, 2:20, taken 2 hours and 40 minutes, making it one of deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. At 12:25 am on the 15th of April 1912, the Cunard liner Carpathia received a message to say that a ship, the Titanic, had struck an iceberg and required immediate assistance. Within a few minutes, the captain of the Carpathia, Arthur Rostron, had altered his course and began streaming towards the site of the stricken liner 58 miles away. Carpathia approached the spot of the collision, and in order to attract the attention of the survivors, the crew launched a spectacular array of rockets and Roman candles. Over the course of the following 4 hours, lifeboat after lifeboat arrived at the Carpathia's side. The Titanic survivors were still enveloped by shock. The captain insisted his ship steam around the site of the disaster in hope of finding more survivors. But there was nothing to be seen on the surface of the water except for what witnesses described as a slight brownish discoloration, fragments of wood, a scattering of straw, occasional deck chair. After hours of searching the waters in a hope of seeing another lifeboat or in hope that their loved one might be saved, but none arrived, the Carpathia set sail for New York. With each mile the Carpathia sailed away from the scene, so the grief of its bereaved passengers intensified. Carl Bear, who had survived along with his sweetheart, said, "To my mind, the 4 days among the sufferers in the Carpathia was much worse and more difficult to forget." On Thursday the 18th of April, the ship of the widows sailed into New York Harbor. The city was enveloped in fog, but in the distance they could hear the mournful tolling of bells. Sadly, that night 1,500 people died and 705 survived. Within a few years, 10 survivors went on to commit suicide. RMS Carpathia also had her bad luck and ended up in her final resting place beneath the waves. The Carpathia was sunk on the 17th of July 1918 after being torpedoed 3 times by German submarine U-55. Some say even the RMS Carpathia played in her own fate of doom by getting involved in the RMS Titanic rescue.